All right, welcome everybody. I think we're about ready to get started. Just a quick reminder, please make sure your mics are muted, just so we can have some consistent audio. Tonight we're going to be talking about academic conversations. It's never too early to start thinking about next year and maybe how you can get the kids talking a little bit more in your class.
Different things, philosophical chairs. And as you are listening, feel free to put questions in the chat, and then we should wrap up no later than 8:15.
My name's Stephen Boone. I'm a sixth grade geography teacher. I've been teaching for about 5 years. And ever since my second year of teaching, I've really been trying to incorporate as many different types of academic conversations into the classroom as possible.
My name's Victoria Barowie. I'm a third grade teacher in Columbia, Maryland, and I'm finishing my 5th year teaching.
I am a current 5th grade math teacher at an all-boys school in Baltimore City, Maryland. This is my 4th year in the classroom. And something for me, I've been trying to encourage and have my students engage in a little bit more rigorous academic conversation throughout the year.
Hi, I'm Christine Donnelly. I've been teaching in Laurel, Maryland about 3 years, but I've been teaching 9 years total. I am a math teacher, and I'm always looking for new ways to have students talk about the math and really learn that vocabulary and understand what they are doing.
I'm Jessica Stith. I am a high school ELA teacher in Baltimore City. This is my 9th school year with Baltimore. I've taught freshmen the last couple years. And like one of my co-presenters said, I'm really focused on increasing the rigor of the conversation that we're having in the classroom. I can get them to talk, but not always the way I want them to. So that's what I'm working on.
So the objectives for tonight is that you will learn different strategies to strengthen conversation in the classroom. We are going to talk about the different benefits of encouraging conversation between students, and then hopefully you will feel comfortable implementing the new strategies on your own.
All right, so first up, we're going to be talking about Socratic seminars. The name comes from the dialogues of Socrates, and it's really about inquiry and getting the kids to think and question things more. So I have a few steps you want to really take to make sure you're doing it correctly. The first is to provide the students with a text. And you can have a small text like an article, or you can use a big text like a textbook or a novel. You could even use multiple sources if you wanted to go into some deeper questions looking at different perspectives. And while you do that, you also want to make sure you announce the seminar. You never want to spring the seminar up on kids. It can get very confusing if you do some sort of pop seminar on them. And you really won't get the outcome you're expecting. Then you want to think about the questions you are going to ask the students. And you want to make sure these questions are open-ended so that there can be an actual discussion. If there is a very specific answer, the conversation's over immediately. So you really want them thinking and asking kind of almost philosophical questions sometimes. Next, you want to set the expectations for the students, which is important because you want to create a safe place where kids can talk. And also make sure they understand they're not doing a debate, they are having a discussion. And you want to explain to them how you get an A just by talking. So for me, I like to make sure kids understand that when you're talking, you should be the only one talking. If you are really trying to be part of the discussion, you're inviting others in. And of course, you're not arguing. The fourth part would be to make sure you're facilitating the conversation and not leading it. And this is probably the hardest part for most teachers, because if you have 30 seconds of kind of that dead air, it can feel very uncomfortable. And it's even more uncomfortable for the kids. So if you stick it out and maybe interject here or there, something like, what does Robert mean when he says yada, yada, yada? And then that will get kids thinking again about what was just said and trying to build off those ideas. And finally, have the kids reflect on the experience. They should be thinking about their participation, but also the seminar as a whole. Was it a good discussion? Do you feel like many people were involved? What could you do to make people feel more welcome into the conversation? There's a handful of benefits for Socratic seminars, which is our slide up now. I like to use it as a differentiated assessment. I used to do a lot of writing my first year of teaching, but I wanted to give kids an opportunity to express their ideas in different ways. So instead of taking that whole essay idea, turn that into the main question of your seminar, and you can still really see what the kids know or they don't know. It includes the development of reading, speaking, listening, and writing, because they're doing aspects of all of those together. I feel a lot of kids are motivated because they control the conversation. It's very empowering for them to get to kind of take charge of what's happening in the class. And finally, I believe it nurtures a respectful school culture. Now, it's not going to change kids overnight or necessarily how they speak to their friends, but they understand kind of what is appropriate when there's a class discussion going on, and that it's okay to disagree, but you should be very respectful about it. And finally, I want to just give you a few samples of Socratic seminar questions in the class, just so you can see that it can be applied to a lot of different content. With English, what tone of voice does Twain give Huck Finn in this chapter? As you can see, it's very open-ended. Kids can pull different evidence from the text to answer that question. Social studies of the 5 rights guaranteed in the First Amendment. Which do you value most and why? A lot of choice there. Science, based on the definition of life, is a computer a living thing? Why or why not? And finally, math. Why are the inches marked on your ruler broken down into smaller units? How do they help you measure things? So it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the curriculum. It can just be something to get kids thinking about just a small piece of what you're learning. I think it helps make it very relevant for them. Up next, we're going to hear from Ashley about fish bowls. So I'm going to kick it over to her.
Hey everyone, so fishbowl conversations, not what you think. A lot of my kids love to participate in fishbowl conversations because it actually has them sit and think about the ideas and the thoughts of others that they're hearing. So like the basic structure of a fishbowl conversation, you have an inside group that is sharing and discussing, and then you have an outside group that is listening to the thoughts and ideas of those inside the fishbowl conversation. So fishbowls, students participate in discussion by asking questions and sharing their thoughts. Everyone outside listens. This is really beneficial for my students especially because they oftentimes struggle with actually sitting and listening to the thoughts of others without interjecting. The most effective prompts or questions that you can ask them don't have necessarily one right answer. You kind of want to have open-ended questions. And for my kids, they really love discussing difficult questions. And we'll get to some of those at the end. But anything that, is not open-ended and does not have a yes or no answer, those are going to be the most beneficial questions for fishbowl conversations. Talking norms at my school, we're an all-boys school, so we call them gentlemen's talk. So basically, my students have a way of kind of like in Socratic seminars where Stephen was talking about how they answer and respond to each other. they do so in a productive and respectful manner. If they don't agree, they say, I respectfully disagree with blank because, or I would like to add to blank because of this. And it has them drawing back evidence from either things that they've heard other people say, or evidence from maybe some prior knowledge, things that they've studied in class, and everything like that. So what you see on your screen, I've pulled this off of Pinterest, and you'll see that link, I believe, towards the end in our resource section. But you can find these pretty much anywhere. I hang these up in my classroom for my students to often reference. It's something that we really try to discuss and hone in with them at the beginning of the year, so that when they're having these academic conversations throughout the year, they're able to recall and use these gentlemen's talk norms. Many benefits of fishbowl conversations. They're super helpful when you want to make sure that all students are participating in the discussion. Like I said, my students oftentimes struggle with being active and attentive listeners without interjecting their thoughts or ideas when someone else is speaking. So fishbowl conversations really help them to listen and consider the thoughts of someone else that's speaking. They also are helpful when you want students to reflect on class discussions. So you can turn a fishbowl conversation into a reflective journal entry or essay. I know in math, we're trying to do some more reflective writing, and especially when it comes to explaining our answers. So fishbowl conversations not only help them with the conversation piece, but they also help them with their writing aspects as well. Last but not least, fishbowls in the classroom. These are great when you need a structure for discussing controversial or difficult topics. We like to use difficult conversations for our morning meeting time, and I provide some resources for y'all at the end. But morning meeting times are, for me, a good time to have those difficult conversations, whether it's about anything they're seeing going on in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And we like to have our time during class too, to have those mathematic structured fishbowl conversations as well. They can be an excellent pre-writing activity or post-writing activity. In English or language arts, you could use a prompt as, should the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn be banned from being read in schools? Social studies, in what ways is the Black Lives Matter movement beneficial? Science, is annual testing necessary? And then in math, which is something I've talked to with my students, should Common Core state standards continue to be mandated? So just a couple of things to think about when having fishbowls conversations in the classroom. You want to choose open-ended topics, kind of difficult conversations where your students are not going to have yes or no answers. Next up, we're going to go to Tori with Number Talks.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I do number talks in my classroom, and I do them 3 times a week in the morning, and we do it for 15 minutes. And so what a number talk is it's mental math. The teacher poses a question on the board and then gives students time to think about it independently, and students need to sit quietly. And if they found an answer, we use hand signals. So if they found it one way, they show one finger and hold it to their chest. If they found it a second way, they show that. And you just give them about 1 to 2 minutes to solve the problem in their head, no pencil, no paper, on their own, not talking with partners. So then after that, you share out, and the teacher first lists all the possible answers on the board, because oftentimes you find that there may be different answers. And once all of the answers are on the board, students need to defend and respectfully disagree or agree with one of the answers. So you have to prove it, you continue with the share out, and then you reflect on the process. And why you do this is you're making sense of math, you're developing efficient computation strategies, communicating mathematically, and then reasoning and proving solutions. Some of the benefits for number talks are that students are able to clarify their own thinking. Oftentimes, I have students who get the wrong answer, and while they're explaining it out loud to their classmates, they say, oh, wait, let me go back. I know what I did wrong. So they're able to realize where their error is, or talking to other peers helps them recognize what they might have done wrong. So another thing is that there's more than one way to find the answer. And an example is so I teach third grade, and on my board, sometimes I'll do 39 plus 15. And some people might do 40 plus 15 minus 1, or maybe 39 plus 20 minus 5. And there's different ways to get to the answer. And just sharing that with students helps them think about more efficient strategies for problem solving. And I think the biggest thing with number talks is that you learn how to respectfully communicate with your peers, and you're understanding that there isn't just one answer for math. There's different ways to get there, and you don't need to jump at someone right away because you don't agree with them or you don't agree with the way they found it. It's just encouraging an open communication with them all. So some examples in the classroom. For kindergarten to second, you might teach them the double strategy. So you would start by putting 7 plus 7 on the board, and students will know that's 14. And then the second one you would put on the board is 7 plus 6. So you're teaching them the strategy. Well, if I know 7 plus 7, then 7 plus 6 would be taking 1 away. Or then you would do 7 plus 8. If I know 7 plus 7, I would just add 1 more. Friendly numbers, you would start with 10 plus 2, and then you'd put up 9 plus 2, hoping that they would realize, okay, I need to make it to a 10. For third to fifth grade, multiplication, division, and fraction is a big thing. And the first time I did this in my class, the principal didn't know what number talks was, and I put on my board 48 times 6, I think. And she wrote in my observation, the teacher didn't provide the students with paper and a pencil to solve. And then further down in the comments, she recognized what I was doing. So if you had 48 times 6, well, if you know 4 times 6, then you should know 40 times 6, and then you can add the 8 plus 6. So it's just teaching them ways to think about it in their head and not rely on a calculator and paper and pencil. And then third to sixth grade, you can look at fractions, decimals, and percentages. So I want to quickly open it up to the floor, and I want you to think about what you teach and if there's something that you would want to put on your board with your students. You can either write it in the comments, or if you want to talk, you can unmute yourself and share how you could incorporate it.
I like just putting, using this as review sometimes even. Fridays, I did number talks in my classroom. I am a math teacher, so it's a little bit easier to apply. But I would do number talks in my classroom and like tell the kids no calculator and just get their brains working a little bit without paper, pencil, and challenging them. And you really just, I always encourage, even if it's wrong, but like every little piece of right, like, oh, that's a really good strategy, even though you may have done this a little incorrect. So just getting them to think and speak about their process.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right, up next, we have philosophical chairs.
Hey again. So philosophical chairs is obviously another way to start that conversation. It's got some similarities to others that we have talked about, but it's really hones in on making the students critically think through reading and conversation. The process I have listed here, but basically you're going to give your students something to read, and it can be adapted for any content. Like Stephen was saying at the beginning with Socratic seminars, it can be a long reading, a short reading, anything that you feel is needed for your class so that students are prepared to discuss that content or that subject matter. I also like this because you're able to give different students different roles. So a teacher or a student can present a high-level question. When the students are doing the reading, they usually take notes first. I've used this in AVID classes as well. So they can read something, annotate it with their notes, and then the next day when they come into class or later on in that class, they can hear the question and have time to think about it. So the room is split into two sides, well, technically three sides, a yes side, a no side, and an undecided. You can tweak those a little bit if it's not strictly yes or no. But the basis of it is you go to which side you agree with. The back is undecided, and students move freely based on evidence that people present. So as a class, they're kind of working to cohesively decide and answer a solution, or just having some conversations. So often in classrooms, I feel like teachers are presented with plenty of opportunities to have deep, meaningful conversations. Sometimes they're really challenging, but we're told or we're scared to have them. This creates a safe space, so you can have people have this discussion. You can have them read things to prove with evidence, and it's not just a heated thing that kids don't have anything to support. So it's really teaching them to agree to a disagree, to prove their point, and then listen to what others are saying. So I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but there's some other benefits as well. You're bringing reading into any content, which we know in most schools is a huge thing. You want them reading for each class. You want them reading different types of readings, and then being able to use that in order to support their thinking and getting them to have opinions. It can be adapted for any content, and they're working together even though they might not agree, which is critical for collaboration and life skills outside of the classroom walls. It gives them opportunities for leadership. So once you set up the norms in your classrooms for philosophical chairs, it's really easy to pick a student leader and have them more lead the discussion as well. And you can literally just sit in the back and observe, grade the discussion, whichever you feel is the most appropriate for your classroom. And then lastly, it just provides that safe space for discussion. There's so many things that our kids want to talk about, but don't know how or don't know when to do it. And we want to provide that safe space for them as their teachers and show them that we care about their thoughts and their thought process. If you can think of any way that you would use that in your classroom, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I love to share ideas. I have some here for just examples for different classrooms. If you have ELA, you can take it from a whole book and think about it. Social studies, you can look at different content of different countries and comparing different countries. So legally immigrate, immigration's huge right now, a huge topic, and this is a safe place where they can talk about it. Similar to what we've been talking about with math, I've shown student work in the past and then just said, like, do you agree or disagree with it? So that's not necessarily a reading piece, but it's a way to adapt it. And then science, human cloning should be banned. Like, what a cool thing to have a discussion about and get students really involved. So I'm looking, and it looks like some people are adding some ideas. So I'm excited to add them to my own toolbox, and anything that I think of. There's resources at the end I'll certainly share with you all. Next up, Jessica is going to talk to us about pop-up debates.
Hi guys. Pop-up debate for me is a great strategy. Like we talked a little bit earlier, this is one of those strategies that can take as little or as long as you want it to. It's popularized by Dave Stewart Jr. I talk about him a lot. He runs a teacher blog. And he's really focused on getting his students speaking and getting his students speaking in ways that will be functional and meaningful in their adult lives. So you can make this super formal and require that they use sentence starters or use a specific format, but you can also make it more casual and say, I just want you to pop up and say what you have to say. This is also a really great bridge between think, pair, share and more formal debate or Socratic styles. It's kind of a middle ground. It's also a good bridge between reading and writing, that sort of task to writing connection. So how does it work? You pose a question, usually after students have read and engaged with the text. The question should be open-ended, should be something that engenders response, and students stand up at their desk. Whoever gets up first speaks first. So if 4 people stand up at once, they have to learn how to concede the floor, which is an important skill, especially when you get into seminar classes in college. You if you're waiting on somebody to call on you, you'll never speak. So how do you sort of join a conversation is a skill that you learn in this. And you can also limit students. So you can say, well, you have 30 seconds to make your point, or you have 2 minutes to make your point, whatever. Like I said, it's very flexible for the teacher. So what are the benefits? Definitely it builds engagement with your text or content. For me, my teaching units all revolve around essential questions. So it's a great way to pull up the essential question and kind of keep kids focused on that as we grapple with material. So I can say to them, hey, what does this piece have to say about freedom and confinement? And kids can kind of come in and make those connections. It builds students' professional speaking skills, which we talked about. And all students are engaged or listening because they need to be in order to know, when do I stand up? How is this conversation flowing? Do I agree with that? Do I want to rebut that? They learn to argue effectively as opposed to shout at each other. And it can be applicable at any grade level or content, which I think is great. And you can use it with other skills and strategies. If you're working, for example, on claims and warrants with students, then you can say, in today's pop-up debate, every person has to provide a claim and a warrant. If you're working on counter arguments, you have to say, you know, you have to provide a counter argument to the person who went before you. If you're working on public speaking skills, you can do the same thing. So there are lots of ways to incorporate other skills in with this. And what are some ideas? So, like I said, can be as quick or detailed as you like. What I also like about it is it's limited teacher preparation. As long as you can come up with a question, you can do pop-up debates. And it can be applied to anything. So in ELA, we can say, what motivates Atticus Finch to defend Tom Robinson? And social studies, we can say, what was the most significant cause of the Civil War? In science, does Johns Hopkins and or the scientific community owe restitution to the family of Henrietta Lacks? And in math, what is the best way to solve this equation? So you can really, like I said, extremely adaptable. So we have just a few minutes left. We have provided here for everybody our Twitter handles if you want to friend us. And we certainly thank you for coming. We also here have a hashtag academic talk. So if you have more thoughts or ideas, feel free to use the hashtag. We'll be following that. But we also have a little bit of time here. We kind of want to hear from you all. What were the ideas that you're thinking, gosh, I think I want to take that into my classroom next year? Or if you're a professor like some of us, you might say, oh, I want to try this with my students. You know, so what are those ideas that you're thinking about? David, I'm not sure that counts. I think this is the only Zoom you've ever attended on an airplane.
Jesse, I see that you wanted to try and incorporate some of these online. Do you teach an online course?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I teach online. I should have this technology stuff down. I actually teach adults to be teachers.
Oh, awesome.
At Marshall University. So I know a lot of this, but some of it is really interesting, and I want to try to incorporate it in my online classes because I don't think the teachers that are using this stuff have the exposure to it that they should.
Great.
I think that's important because when I've gone to trainings, it's really been important that they forced me to try the styles as a student before I went back into my classroom and tried to teach it to students. It's amazing how having an experience as a student will help you understand what your students are going to struggle with.
You need to tell my students that.
David, I'd be interested to see how the pop-up debates work for you. And just so y'all know,
I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to drop the link to this presentation in the chat, but we have like 6 pages of specific resources for each of the types of academic English, or sorry, academic conversation. I got derailed with David's comment. So certainly check those out, and lots more ideas and ways and approaches to using these forms of academic conversation.
If you think of any and you want to add them to Twitter, make sure you use our hashtag so that we can all benefit from them.
And if you happen to try something, record it, share it. Let's see it. So some of these I'm definitely going to be trying with my 6th graders next year.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Looky there, we got out exactly on time. We like to respect people's time.
We hope you enjoyed it.